Alex Carter had always been a simple person, someone who found joy in the little things. Life on the farm was predictable but fulfilling, a rhythm dictated by sunrise and sunset, rain and harvest. Nestled at the edge of a growing suburban neighborhood, Alex's farm stood as a quiet reminder of what once was: wide open spaces, rolling fields, and fresh air untainted by city noise. It wasn't much, just a modest patch of land with a weathered barn, rows of crops, and a few chickens clucking around. But to Alex, it was everything. Every morning started the same way. The rooster crowed before dawn, and Alex would step out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, taking in the stillness of the countryside. There was something magical about those early hours when the world felt untouched. The gravel driveway leading up to the barn stretched like a ribbon through the fields, worn smooth over years of tractors and trucks coming and going. It was practical, functional, nothing more than a path for work. Or so Alex thought. Things hadn't always been peaceful between Alex and the nearby Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA governed the shiny new subdivision that bordered the farm. Their streets were lined with manicured lawns, cookie-cutter houses, and families bustling about their busy lives. To them, Alex's farm probably seemed out of place, an old relic from another time. Most days, the two worlds coexisted without issue. But lately, tensions had begun to rise. It all started innocently enough. Residents from the subdivision occasionally drove down the gravel driveway to turn their cars around or park briefly while walking their dogs along the edge of the property. At first, Alex didn't mind. After all, they weren't causing any harm. But then, the visits became more frequent. Some even parked there during neighborhood events, claiming it was convenient. Alex tried to ignore it, hoping it would blow over. Unfortunately, ignoring the problem only made it worse. One afternoon, as Alex was hauling hay bales into the barn, a sleek black SUV pulled up unannounced. Out stepped Mr. Thompson, the head of the HOA, wearing an expensive suit that looked wildly out of place against the backdrop of dirt and straw. He cleared his throat loudly, waiting for Alex to notice him. When Alex finally turned around, wiping sweat from their brow, Mr. Thompson launched into a speech about how the driveway belonged to the community. According to him, it had been used as public access for decades before Alex bought the land. Now, he said, the HOA wanted to pave it over and officially designate it as overflow parking for the subdivision. Alex listened in stunned silence, clutching the pitchfork tightly. Public access, overflow parking. The very idea felt absurd. This was private property, purchased fair and square. The deed said so, clear as day. Yet here was this man in his polished shoes, acting like he had every right to dictate what happened on Alex's land. As Mr. Thompson droned on, Alex couldn't help but feel a knot tightening in their stomach. Something told them this wasn't going to end quietly. The encounter left Alex uneasy. That night, sitting alone at the kitchen table with a map of the property spread out before them, Alex traced the boundaries with a finger. Everything seemed fine on paper. The driveway was part of the farm, no question about it. But deep down, Alex knew the HOA wouldn't back down easily. They were known for getting their way, no matter the cost. And if they decided to fight, Alex would need more than just a piece of paper to defend their home. Little did Alex know, the battle lines were already being drawn, and the stakes were higher than they could have imagined. The next morning, Alex woke up with a heavy feeling in their chest. The conversation with Mr. Thompson replayed in their mind like a broken record. Overflow parking. On their land. It sounded ridiculous, almost laughable. But Alex knew better than to underestimate the HOA. They had seen how aggressively they handled disputes in the past. Fines for overgrown grass, lawsuits over fence colors, and endless nitpicking over minor infractions. If the HOA wanted something badly enough, they wouldn't hesitate to throw their weight around. As Alex sipped their coffee on the porch, a white envelope caught their eye. It was tucked under the doormat, slightly damp from the morning dew. Picking it up, Alex noticed the official-looking logo of the HOA stamped on the front. Their stomachs sank. With trembling hands, they opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a formal letter, written in cold, clinical language that left no room for negotiation. The letter stated that the HOA considered the gravel driveway part of historic public access and demanded Alex allow them to pave it over for use as additional parking during community events. If Alex refused, the HOA threatened legal action to enforce their claim. The words blurred together as Alex read and reread the document, anger bubbling beneath the surface. How dare they? This was their land, paid for with years of hard work and sacrifice. Yet here was this group of strangers, trying to take it away piece by piece. Alex crumpled the letter in frustration, pacing back and forth across the porch. What could they possibly do against an organization with deep pockets and lawyers on speed dial? For the first time in years, Alex felt truly powerless. The farm wasn't just a place. It was a way of life, a connection to something real and honest in a world increasingly dominated by greed and convenience. Losing even a small part of it felt unbearable. Determined to find answers, Alex decided to talk to someone who might understand. A neighbor named Mrs. Harper lived down the road, her house perched at the edge of the subdivision. She was older, wiser, and had lived in the area long before the HOA existed. Alex figured she might have some insight into the history of the land, or perhaps advice on how to handle the situation. When Alex arrived at Mrs. Harper's cozy little cottage, she greeted them warmly, inviting them inside for tea. Over steaming mugs, Alex explained everything. The driveway, the letter, the looming threat of legal trouble. Mrs. Harper listened intently, nodding occasionally but saying little until Alex finished speaking. Then, leaning forward slightly, she said, "You know, there's something you should consider." "What's that?" Alex asked, desperate for any glimmer of hope. Mrs. Harper hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Your farm sits right above the main water supply line for the entire subdivision. I remember hearing about it years ago when they were building those houses. That pipeline runs straight under your property, doesn't it?" Alex froze, staring at her in disbelief. The water line. Of course, they'd mentioned it briefly during the purchase process, but Alex had never given it much thought. It was supposed to be a shared utility line, maintained by the local government. Surely, the HOA didn't control it, did they? Mrs. Harper continued, "I'm not sure who technically owns it now, but if you're sitting on their lifeline, well," she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. A spark of realization ignited in Alex's mind. Could this be the leverage they needed? The idea was unsettling. It meant playing a dangerous game, one where emotions ran high and mistakes could cost dearly. Still, it was worth looking into. That evening, after thanking Mrs. Harper profusely, Alex sat down at their computer and began digging through old municipal records. Hours passed as they sifted through dusty documents and blurry scans, searching for proof of ownership. Finally, late into the night, Alex found what they were looking for: a decades-old agreement showing that the water line had never been formally transferred to the HOA or any other governing body. Technically, it still belonged to the original landowner, which meant, by extension, it belonged to Alex. Relief washed over them, followed quickly by determination. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Alex drafted a polite but firm response to the HOA. In it, they rejected the claims about the driveway and subtly hinted at the consequences of pushing the matter further. As Alex sealed the envelope and placed it in the mailbox, they couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and resolve. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, they felt like they had a fighting chance. The days following Alex's response to the HOA felt like walking on thin ice. Every time the phone rang or a car drove up the gravel driveway, Alex braced themselves for another confrontation. But strangely, there was no immediate reply from the HOA. The silence was almost worse than an outright argument. It left too much room for uncertainty. Were they planning something bigger, or had they simply underestimated Alex and were scrambling for their next move? Determined not to sit idle, Alex decided to take matters into their own hands. The water line under the farm wasn't just a piece of information. It was a lifeline for both sides. If the HOA wanted to play hardball, Alex needed to make sure they understood exactly what was at stake. With that thought firmly planted in their mind, Alex reached out to a local lawyer recommended by Mrs. Harper. His name was Mr. Dawson, a gruff but kind-hearted man who specialized in property disputes. During their meeting, Alex laid out the entire situation, the HOA's demands, the discovery about the water line, and the letter they'd sent in response. Mr. Dawson listened carefully, jotting notes in a worn leather notebook. When Alex finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "You're sitting on a powder keg here," he said finally, "but you've also got leverage." He explained that while using the water line as a bargaining chip could work, it came with risks. Shutting off access, even temporarily, would cause chaos in the subdivision. People depended on that water for drinking, cooking, bathing, everything. If Alex went down that road, they'd have to be prepared for backlash, not just from the HOA, but possibly from some residents too. Still, if handled carefully, this knowledge could give Alex significant power in negotiations. With Mr. Dawson's guidance, Alex decided to take a precautionary step. They hired a local plumber to install a manual shutoff valve directly on the water line. It wasn't illegal. It was basic maintenance, really. But it ensured Alex had control over the flow of water if things escalated. The plumber, a chatty man named Joe, raised an eyebrow when Alex explained the situation. "Sounds like you're gearing up for war," he joked, though his tone turned serious when he added, "Just be careful. Messing with water is no small thing." As the valve was installed, Alex couldn't shake the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. This wasn't just about protecting the farm anymore. It was about wielding power responsibly. They didn't want to hurt anyone or disrupt lives unnecessarily, but they also refused to let the HOA bully them into giving up part of their land. It was a delicate balance, one that required precision and nerve. To prepare further, Alex spent hours researching similar cases online, reading stories of other farmers and landowners who had faced off against HOAs. Some had won, others had lost, but all shared one common thread: preparation was key. Armed with legal advice, physical evidence, and a newfound sense of confidence, Alex began drafting a plan. If the HOA pushed harder, Alex would push back smarter. Meanwhile, whispers of the brewing conflict started spreading through the subdivision. Neighbors noticed the tension whenever Alex drove past, their old truck kicking up dust on the gravel road. Speculation ran wild. Was Alex really threatening to cut off the water supply? Did they have the right to do that? Conversations buzzed at coffee shops and school pickup lines, dividing opinions. Some sided with the HOA, believing Alex was being unreasonable. Others sympathized, seeing the farmer as an underdog fighting against corporate greed. One evening, as Alex sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, they spotted headlights approaching. A sleek sedan pulled up near the driveway, and out stepped Mr. Thompson once again. This time, however, he wasn't alone. 2 other members of the HOA board accompanied him, their expressions stern and unyielding. Alex stood slowly, heart pounding, ready for whatever came next. "Mr. Carter," Mr. Thompson began, his voice clipped and formal. "We need to discuss your recent correspondence. You seem to misunderstand the seriousness of this matter." Alex crossed their arms, standing tall despite the knot tightening in their stomach. "I understand perfectly," they replied evenly. "And I think you're the ones misunderstanding something. That driveway, and this land, is mine. If you try to take it, you'll regret it." For a moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with tension, each side sizing the other up. Then Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, glancing uneasily at his colleagues. Let's not jump to conclusions, he said, his tone softening slightly. Perhaps we can come to an agreement without resorting to drastic measures. The tension between Alex and the HOA reached its boiling point when the organization called for an emergency town hall meeting. The purpose, as stated in the official notice sent to all residents, was to address concerns regarding community resources and property access. But everyone knew what it really meant. This was the HOA's attempt to rally public support against Alex and pressure them into submission. On the evening of the meeting, the community center buzzed with energy. Residents packed the room, filling every seat and spilling into the aisles. Some had come out of curiosity, others out of frustration, and a few because they genuinely cared about finding a solution. The atmosphere was charged, a mix of murmurs, nervous laughter, and heated side conversations. At the front of the room stood a long table draped with a white cloth, where Mr. Thompson and the rest of the HOA board sat stiffly, their faces masks of determination. Alex arrived late, slipping quietly through the back door to avoid drawing attention. Dressed in their usual work clothes, jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt, they looked strikingly out of place among the neatly dressed crowd. Still, Alex carried themselves with quiet confidence, their jaw set and shoulders squared. They weren't here to win a popularity contest. They were here to defend their home. Mr. Thompson opened the meeting with a dramatic flourish, painting a picture of chaos if the driveway issue wasn't resolved. He spoke passionately about overcrowded streets during events, frustrated residents unable to find parking, and the potential safety hazards caused by cars lining narrow roads. His voice rose as he declared, "This isn't just about convenience. It's about fairness. The driveway has always been a shared resource, and we simply cannot allow one person to monopolize something that benefits the entire community." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement. A few people even clapped, emboldened by his words. Alex felt a flicker of doubt creep in. Was this how it would end? Would the majority turn against them, leaving them isolated and powerless? But then something unexpected happened. A middle-aged woman near the front raised her hand timidly. When Mr. Thompson acknowledged her, she said, "I've lived here for years, and I'd never thought of that driveway as ours. It belongs to the farm. Maybe we should respect that." Her comment sparked a ripple effect. Another resident chimed in, saying, "It's not like we don't have other options. Why are we picking a fight over this?" Voices began to rise, opinions clashing as the room split into factions. Some defended the HOA's position, while others sided with Alex, arguing that the farmer had every right to protect their land. Finally, it was Alex's turn to speak. Standing up slowly, they walked to the podium, feeling dozens of eyes on them. For a moment, they hesitated, gathering their thoughts. Then, in a calm but firm voice, they began to explain their side of the story. They talked about buying the farm, working tirelessly to build a life from scratch, and the deep connection they felt to the land. They showed documents proving ownership and pointed out that the HOA's claims had no legal basis. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Alex leaned forward slightly, their tone shifting from defensive to deliberate. "There's something else you all need to know," they said, pausing for effect. "My farm sits above the water line that supplies your homes. Without my cooperation, that water could stop flowing entirely." The room fell silent. People exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Alex's words sinking in. Even Mr. Thompson looked visibly shaken, his earlier bravado crumbling under the reality of the situation. Someone in the crowd whispered, "They wouldn't actually do that, would they?" Alex met their gaze steadily. "I don't want it to come to that," they replied. "But make no mistake, I will do whatever it takes to protect what's mine." The tension in the room was palpable. For the first time, the HOA's authority wavered. Residents began questioning whether the driveway was worth risking their water supply. As the meeting drew to a close, it was clear that the tide had turned. What had started as a united front against Alex had fractured into uncertainty and doubt. Walking out of the community center that night, Alex felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. They had stood their ground, but the battle was far from over. Still, one thing was certain. The HOA now knew exactly who they were dealing with, and they were no longer so eager to push their demands. The days following the town hall meeting were unlike anything Alex had experienced before. The HOA, once so confident and unyielding, seemed to retreat into uncertainty. Whispers of Alex's control over the water supply spread quickly through the subdivision, sparking both fear and resentment among residents. Some began to see Alex not as an adversary, but as someone holding all the cards in a high-stakes game they hadn't fully understood. Others, however, grew angrier, accusing Alex of using scare tactics and putting their needs at risk. Behind closed doors, though, the HOA was scrambling. Mr. Thompson called an emergency board meeting to discuss their next move. The members argued heatedly, some insisting they press forward with legal action, while others urged caution. "We can't afford to lose this," one member snapped, pounding the table. "But we also can't afford to push too hard," another countered, glancing nervously at the papers detailing Alex's leverage. It was clear that the stakes had shifted dramatically, and the HOA no longer held the upper hand. Realizing they needed a new approach, a small delegation from the HOA reached out to Alex privately. They requested a meeting, framing it as an opportunity to resolve matters amicably. Though skeptical, Alex agreed, knowing that direct communication might finally lead to a resolution. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, where Alex sat across from 3 representatives of the HOA, including Mr. Thompson himself. The conversation started tense, with both sides exchanging polite but guarded pleasantries. Then Mr. Thompson broke the ice, leaning forward slightly. "Look, Mr. Carter, we understand your concerns about the driveway, but you must see our side of things too. Our residents need solutions, especially during events." Alex nodded slowly, choosing their words carefully. "I get it. I really do. I'm not trying to make life harder for anyone, but this is my land, and I've worked too hard to let it slip away because of vague claims about historic access. If you're looking for compromise, fine. Let's talk, but don't expect me to give up what's rightfully mine." The HOA reps exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a woman named Ms. Patel, spoke up hesitantly. What if we dropped our claim to the driveway entirely? No paving, no parking, nothing. Would you consider ensuring uninterrupted water access in return?" Alex raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "That's a start," they said evenly. "But after everything that's happened, I'd need more than just promises. This has gone beyond inconvenience. It's exposed weaknesses in how the water line is managed. If we're going to move forward, there needs to be accountability." Ms. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "We could contribute funds toward upgrading the pipeline infrastructure. That way, everyone benefits, and future disputes like this can be avoided." For the first time since the conflict began, Alex felt a flicker of hope. The proposal wasn't perfect, but it addressed 2 critical issues: protecting the farm and securing reliable water access for the subdivision. Still, Alex knew better than to agree outright without consulting Mr. Dawson, their lawyer. "Let me think about it," they said diplomatically, "and I'll have my attorney review the details." Over the next few days, Alex met with Mr. Dawson to go over the terms. Together, they drafted a formal agreement outlining the HOA's withdrawal of all claims to the driveway, financial contributions toward improving the water line, and a public acknowledgement of Alex's full ownership of the property. Once finalized, the document was sent to the HOA for approval. When the response came back, with minor adjustments but overall acceptance, Alex felt a wave of relief wash over them. For months, they had been caught in a whirlwind of stress and uncertainty. Now finally, there was light at the end of the tunnel, As Alex signed the agreement alongside the HOA representatives in a quiet office, they couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. What had started as a simple dispute over a gravel driveway had escalated into a battle of wills, exposing vulnerabilities and testing limits. In the end, it wasn't brute force or aggression that won the day. It was patience, strategy, and a willingness to stand firm when it mattered most. Walking away from the office that afternoon, Alex allowed themselves a small smile. The war was over, and they had emerged victorious, not just for themselves, but for the integrity of their land and the principles they believed in. Yet even as they returned to the farm, ready to put the chaos behind them, Alex knew one thing for certain: life would never quite feel the same again. With the agreement signed and sealed, Alex thought the worst was finally over. But as it turned out, the aftermath of the conflict brought its own set of challenges and unexpected opportunities. The HOA wasted no time in trying to smooth things over with the residents of the subdivision. They sent out a carefully worded letter to all homeowners, explaining that the dispute had been resolved amicably and emphasizing their commitment to maintaining harmony between the community and Alex's farm. "We are pleased to announce," the letter read, "that the driveway will remain private property, ensuring the preservation of Mr. Carter's land. Additionally, funds have been allocated to improve the water infrastructure, benefiting everyone involved." While the language was polished and diplomatic, it didn't stop some residents from grumbling about how the HOA had handled the situation. A few even admitted privately to Alex that they admired the farmers' determination to stand up for themselves. Word spread quickly, and soon Alex found themselves becoming something of a local legend. Neighbors who had previously barely acknowledged their existence now waved warmly when passing by or stopped to chat at the edge of the property. One family even brought over a basket of fresh-baked cookies as a peace offering. "You really showed them," the mother said with a grin, her kids peeking curiously at the chickens pecking around the yard. Alex accepted the gesture graciously, though they couldn't help but feel slightly amused at the sudden change in attitude. But not everyone was so forgiving. A small group of residents remained bitter, convinced that Alex had bullied the HOA into submission. At first, these voices were loud, airing their grievances on social media and at neighborhood gatherings. However, without the backing of the HOA, their complaints carried little weight. Over time, the dissent faded into the background, overshadowed by more pressing concerns like school fundraisers and holiday decorations. Meanwhile, work began on upgrading the water pipeline, a project funded jointly by the HOA and Alex. Contractors arrived early one morning, their trucks rumbling down the gravel driveway as they surveyed the area. Alex watched closely, making sure every detail aligned with the agreement. The old pipeline, rusted and prone to leaks, was replaced with modern, durable materials designed to last for decades. As the workers dug trenches and laid new pipes, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Not only had they protected their land, but they'd also ensured the community's water supply would be safer and more reliable moving forward. The improvements extended beyond just the physical infrastructure. Signs were installed along the driveway, clearly marking it as private property, with bold letters warning against unauthorized use. The HOA even agreed to host educational sessions for new residents, explaining boundary lines and discouraging any future misunderstandings. These measures may have seemed minor, but to Alex, they represented a hard-won victory, a line drawn firmly in the sand. As life slowly returned to normal, Alex took stock of everything that had happened. The conflict had tested them in ways they never imagined, pushing them to dig deep and fight for what mattered most. It had also taught them valuable lessons about resilience, negotiation, and the importance of standing your ground, even when the odds felt stacked against you. One evening, as Alex sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the fields in hues of gold and crimson, they reflected on how much had changed. The farm was still the same place it had always been, a haven of simplicity and hard work. But Alex wasn't the same person anymore. They had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger because of it. Though the battle was won, Alex knew better than to let their guard down completely. Life on the edge of suburbia meant constant adaptation, whether dealing with encroaching development or navigating relationships with neighbors. Still, as they listened to the crickets chirping and the distant hum of evening traffic, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. This land, this farm, wasn't just a piece of property. It was a legacy worth protecting. And if anyone tried to take it away again, they'd find Alex ready to defend it, just as fiercely as before. Months passed, and the farm settled back into its peaceful rhythm. The gravel driveway remained untouched, save for Alex's tractor and the occasional delivery truck. The shiny new signs marking it as private property stood tall, a quiet but firm reminder of the battle that had been fought and won. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Better than good, in fact. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alex could wake up each morning without the weight of looming conflict pressing down on them. The subdivision, too, seemed to adapt. Residents grew accustomed to respecting the boundaries of Alex's land, and the tension that once hung thick in the air began to dissipate. Some even went out of their way to show kindness, leaving baskets of fruit or handwritten notes at the edge of the property. "Thank you for standing your ground," one note read. It reminded us all how important it is to protect what matters. Alex smiled whenever they found these small tokens of appreciation, tucking the notes into a drawer where they kept mementos of the farm's history. But perhaps the most surprising change came from within Alex themselves. Before the conflict with the HOA, they had always seen themselves as just a simple farmer, someone who worked hard, kept to themselves, and stayed out of trouble. Now they realized there was strength in vulnerability, power in knowing when to push back, and wisdom in choosing battles carefully. They weren't just a farmer anymore. They were a protector of their land and a guardian of fairness. Spring arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal. The fields were lush and green, the barn freshly painted, and the chickens clucking happily as they scratched at the dirt. One Saturday morning, Alex decided to host an open house, a gesture of goodwill toward the subdivision. It wasn't something they planned initially, but after so many neighbors had reached out with kindness, it felt like the right thing to do. Tables were set up near the barn, laden with homemade jams, fresh eggs, and jars of honey harvested from the beehives Alex had installed last year. A sign at the entrance read, *Welcome to Carter Farm. Come see where your food comes from. To Alex's surprise, dozens of people showed up, families with kids, curious teenagers, and elderly couples eager to reminisce about simpler times. Children laughed as they chased chickens around the yard, while adults marveled at the rows of crops stretching toward the horizon. One visitor, a young mother holding her toddler's hand, approached Alex shyly. "I've lived here for years, but I never really knew this place existed," she admitted. "It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with us." Alex nodded, touched by her words. "This farm has been here long before the houses went up," they replied. "And it'll still be here long after. Maybe now we can find a way to coexist." As the day drew to a close and the last visitors headed home, Alex stood by the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. The farm looked different somehow, not because anything physical had changed, but because its role in the community had shifted. It was no longer seen as an obstacle or an inconvenience. It was a cornerstone, a piece of living history that connected the past to the present. That night, as Alex sat at the kitchen table going over plans for the next planting season, they paused to glance at the drawer where they kept the notes from neighbors. Opening it, they pulled out one particular message that had stuck with them. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes, they drive tractors. A smile spread across Alex's face as they tucked the note back inside. Heroes? Maybe not. But fighters? Absolutely. And as long as there was breath in their body, Alex vowed to keep fighting. For the farm, for the land, and for the delicate balance between progress and preservation. The seasons would continue to change, bringing new challenges and triumphs. But one thing was certain. Alex Carter had carved out a legacy, not just for themselves, but for everyone lucky enough to call this corner of the world home.